Story 1. Vince Neil of Motley Crue drove drunk and killed one of his very good friends and gave the two people in the other car very bad injuries and brain damage. He also had other driving under the influence incidents after this. But hey, everybody loves a good party song, and now he has a famous liquor brand. Story 2. Kurt Cobain's mother regularly goes on talk shows and interviews where she talks about how supportive she was of Kurt and how she knew how famous he would become from the moment she heard his music. Yes, it's the same mom that abused Kurt and kicked him out multiple times, making him live with his grandparents, friends, and sometimes sleep under a bridge. Story 3. R. Kelly married Aaliyah when she was 15 years old in the mid-1990s, yet it took nearly 2 decades for people to start boycotting him as a sexual predator. He was still making songs with Beyoncé and Lady Gaga for a long time. Story 4. This may not be the best place for it, but the Watergate scandal was about a rigged election, not just a minor cover-up of a minor crime. The story is usually told from the viewpoint of the investigation, so facts are revealed in the order in which they came to light, not the order in which they happened, which makes it easy to forget the messed-up nature of the actual crimes. The break-in that got busted was a minor mission in the scheme to rig the 1972 Democratic primary. In fact, it's been estimated to be about the 6th time they had broken into the Democratic National Committee offices. The goal of that particular break-in was to repair a bugging device that had been placed at a previous break-in and had stopped working. The committee to re-elect the president had gone so far as to plant Nixon loyalists in the Democratic National Committee. The objective was to discredit Ed Muskie, the early Democratic frontrunner who was destroying Nixon in the polls. Nixon wanted to run against McGovern, a far-left fringe Democrat who was essentially unelectable. Muskie's campaign limo driver was a Nixon plant who was leaking intelligence from overheard conversations. Other staff reproduced confidential documents and handed them over to the White House. This was electoral fraud on a wholesale level. He got busted for a cover-up related to a minor break-in, but in fact, a very real, massive conspiracy was in wide operation that gets more or less glossed over in the retelling. Story 5. Ted Nugent avoided the draft by soiling his pants and has a song called Jailbait, which ends with him pleading with an officer not to arrest him and instead share a 13-year-old. Story 6. Johnny Cash walked out on his wife and kids, saying that his career was more important to him than they were. He eventually settled down with June Carter and started a whole new family while still ignoring the kids he already had. Story 7. Piers Morgan was the editor of the Daily Mirror during the Iraq War. He published photos that he knew were fake of American and British troops abusing Iraqi prisoners. He was fired but somehow managed to make a successful media career out of it. Story 8. Here's a list I compiled earlier this year. Jimmy Page was 26 when he started dating 14-year-old Lori Maddox. Mick Jagger had a few encounters with Maddox around the same time. Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones started dating 13-year-old Mandy Smith when he was 47. He got her mother's permission. Steven Tyler convinced the mother of 16-year-old Julia Holcomb to make him her legal guardian, then snorted cocaine next to her hospital bed while she was having an abortion. David Bowie allegedly had relations with Lori Maddox and involved her 15-year-old friend, along with other underage girls. Jerry Lee Lewis married his 13-year-old cousin. She still believed in Santa on their honeymoon. Elvis Presley was reportedly involved with underage girls, including a relationship with Priscilla, who was 14 when they met. Chuck Berry was arrested for crossing state lines with a 14-year-old prostitute and was found recording women in the washroom of his restaurant. Courtney Love claims she was intimate with Ted Nugent when she was 12. He also adopted a 17-year-old to avoid charges of kidnapping and wrote songs about avoiding pedophilia charges. Anthony Kiedis of Red Hot Chili Peppers wrote about relationships with underage girls, such as in Catholic Schoolgirls Rule, about a 14-year-old. Iggy Pop wrote about relationships with 13-year-olds, as seen in the lyrics to Look Away. Marvin Gaye impregnated his wife's 15-year-old niece. Don Henley of the Eagles was charged after paramedics found him with 2 naked girls, aged 15 and 16. Victor Salva, a director, raped a 13-year-old boy while directing a movie the boy was in. He was also found with child pornography, went to jail, and began working on powder shortly after release. Story 9. George Wallace, the infamous pro-segregation governor of Alabama in the 1960s, did not inform his wife that her doctor diagnosed her with cancer. During this time, doctors often told patients' relatives about a cancer diagnosis instead of the patient, especially if the patient was female. The reason was that she was running for governor as a surrogate for him since he had reached his term limits, and he thought that the diagnosis would negatively affect her chances of winning. She ended up finding out about it 4 years later during a visit to a gynecologist, but unfortunately, the cancer had progressed to the point that she died from it 3 years after learning that she had cancer and that her husband had known about it. He ended up successfully getting the term limits repealed and went on to serve a few more terms as governor. People forget about this, I assume, because of all the other terrible things he did. Her name was Lurleen Wallace, for those interested. Story 10. Drake seems to be ignored for grooming a young underage fan, at age 14, into being his girlfriend until she recently turned 18 this year. And now he's even supposedly doing it to a young actress. Story 11. Salman Khan, a very famous Indian actor, was involved in an incident where he drove his car over people who were sleeping on the side of the road, resulting in at least one death. Despite this, he continued with his acting career and on Indian television due to his fame. He ran over 4 people, killing one of them. He was later found guilty 13 years after the incident, then appealed, and the charges were quashed. Story in Dekdai, Gwyneth Paltrow. She's a con artist and manages a multi-level marketing business, as well as recommending women treat their illness by putting rocks up their vagina and steaming their privates, causing harm to people. You can say she's an idiot or just that she's a sociopath who loves making money off hurting other people. Story 13. Every time something like this is posted, no one cares about my comment on how Sean Kingston, the American/Jamaican rapper, has sexually assaulted multiple women near where I live, and he's gotten away with it every time by threatening legal action. If anyone actually cares, I can link proof from a girl explaining what happened to her, but I will censor some things for her sake. Basically, he's doing rap shows and then drugging girls in the area, or you can just look up on Google Sean Kingston sexual assault and many results will come up. Shame on you, Sean Kingston. Your music is terrible. Edit. I can't post the proof I was talking about without making a whole different post because it's screenshots of the Facebook status they made, not sure how. But this individual has been implicated in things like this as far back as 2010. The incident I'm talking about happened 2 years ago in British Columbia, Canada. Edit 2. Here is the account I was talking about involving Sean Kingston. The person just took his name out, but I remember it was about him, and I've removed identifying things so they may stay anonymous. Edit 3. Thank you so much to whoever gave me my first gold, and to the people who upvoted this comment. And again, shame on you, Sean Kingston. Story 14. Dr. Dre beat a reporter, D. Barnes, savagely for writing a negative story on him, or one he perceived as negative, I don't know. He picked her up by her hair and began slamming her head and the right side of her body repeatedly against a brick wall near the stairway as his bodyguard held off the crowd with a gun. After Dr. Dre tried to throw her down the stairs and failed, he began kicking her in the ribs and hands. She escaped and ran into the women's restroom. Dr. Dre followed her and grabbed her from behind by the hair again and proceeded to punch her in the back of the head. He and Eminem would go on to joke about it as the man who slapped D. Barnes. Dr. Dre produced and is featured in rapper Eminem's song Guilty Conscience, in which Eminem references the incident as a humorous put-down. Dre reportedly fell out of his chair laughing at it. Story 15. There's a soccer player in Brazil who killed his mistress, quartered her body, and gave it to dogs to eat to make it harder for the police to find out. He went to jail for a few years, and now he is playing again and making tons of money like nothing happened. Edit. Okay, he is not making a ton of money. What I meant is that he's probably going to have a pretty comfortable life and have his career back. Also, the woman wasn't his wife. It was his mistress, but they had a child together. Still, she was a person. His name is Bruno Fernandes de Souza. Story 16. There was that time James Franco tried to meet a teenager. After she posted the exchange on social media, telling him how old she was and him not caring and still wanting to see her. All he had to do was go on a few morning talk shows a couple of days later and say, "You don't always know who you're talking to online," and everyone instantly forgot about it. He framed it as if he was the one who was deceived, and people just let it slide even though that clearly wasn't the case. Story 17. Jerry Seinfeld dated a 17-year-old girl in high school when he was 39 years old. Edit. I know it isn't illegal. He had money, fame, and was at the height of his show, and he chose to date a 17-year-old who is still in high school. It might not be illegal and as bad as murder, rape, or kidnapping, but it's still pretty scummy. Story 18. Andy Dick has sexually assaulted people an absurd number of times and also got Phil Hartman's wife back into drugs, which led to her murdering Hartman in an intoxicated state. You would think he would have been ruined in the Me Too movement. But apparently we pass it off like, "Ha, that's classic Andy Dick." To those saying Andy Dick doesn't really get a pass because everyone hates him, he's not in prison, which is where anyone else would end up for doing half the things he did, so I call that a huge pass. Story 19. I see people still saying great things about Tom Cruise all the time, especially on Reddit movies. It's like they forgot he's heavily involved in Scientology. You know, that problematic group that confines people in compounds until they conform, that group that has been involved in serious crimes, that group that avoids taxes with their questionable church status, the group that intimidates and ruins the lives of those who oppose them. It's a huge evil cult. He's a very big part of it, and yet people seem okay with him. Story 20. Mr. Mosby from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody killed someone in a drunk driving accident. Phil Lewis is unlike many of the others on this thread in that he was sincerely remorseful for his actions. The comedy troupe that he created helped spread awareness of the dangers of drunk and reckless driving, and that helped play a role in his reduced sentence. People can change with reflection, introspection, and genuine remorse for their wrongdoings, and he seems like a very good representation of that. Story 21. Rick James. He and his girlfriend literally kidnapped someone, burned them with a crack pipe, and sexually assaulted her. But people just want to go, "Rick James, bitch." Story 22. Is no one going to mention Caitlyn Jenner hitting that elderly woman and forcing her into traffic? Then getting the Woman of the Year award? I guess I remembered that wrong. Turns out it was an elderly woman, and the woman died when she was hit by a Hummer. Also, remember that Brendan Schaub, the millionaire podcaster and comedian, spit in someone's face and then threw them through a sliding glass door because they asked him to stop eating his food? Look into it. Story 23. Newt Gingrich is a Republican politician. He married his high school geometry teacher when he was 19 and she was 26. He had multiple affairs, and while she was in the hospital undergoing treatment for cancer, he came into her hospital room and told her he was divorcing her. Friends of Gingrich report that Newt told them that she wasn't pretty enough to be the wife of a president, which he planned to be. He proceeded to divorce her and then didn't pay child support, and his first wife had to get help from the church to make ends meet. I say first wife because he got his divorce and, in 6 months, married his second wife. But while with his second wife, he had an affair with his staffer. During this affair, the massive hypocrite led the impeachment proceedings of Bill Clinton for lying about an affair. He got divorced and 4 months later married his latest wife. He also blamed past infidelities on his passion for this country. He is credited with driving a wedge between the parties in politics and being a leader in Christian family values. You can currently find him as a popular pundit on news programs. Story 24. I think you all know the song Despacito, which is performed by Luis Fonsi. Well, this man was married to a beautiful woman who had breast cancer. During her entire process of chemotherapy, he wasn't there and even told her, when she had a breast removed, that he didn't want her as a woman. This ended up in a divorce. Story 25. Everyone's celebrity hero Bill Murray allegedly beat his wife repeatedly, up until his wife divorced him in 2007. Edit. Unsubstantiated legally, ex-wife claimed. Story 26. Paul Walker was having relationships with underage girls that were half his age. After news of the actor's death broke, the Daily Mail and In Touch Weekly both ran features on how Walker's current girlfriend, Jasmine Pilcher Gosnell, was coping with her loss, Both noted that the pair began a relationship while she was 16 and he was 33. Before Pilchard Gosnell, Walker had dated another woman, Aubriana Atwell, who was allegedly 16 as well. And since there are many statutory rape apologists, here's some clarifying legal information. What he did was a felony both times. Story 27. James Franco tried to meet a 17-year-old girl in a hotel through Instagram. He was in his 30s when this happened. Edit. For anyone asking for proof, here's a link. Story 28. Not really a celebrity, but politicians are a kind of celebrity, I think. The Chappaquiddick incident is a good one. Story 29. Marcos Alonso, a football player for Chelsea Football Club, was driving drunk and killed a 22-year-old woman. He was driving 70 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone with an alcohol level of 0.93 milligrams. His final punishment was a $67,000 fine and a driving ban for 40 months. He was driving drunk and crashed into a stone wall. The woman who was killed was his girlfriend, who was a passenger in his car.